Jean here, and I have a very exciting video for you guys. It's that time of the year again where I get to pick out 10 of my favorite books. It's always super hard to look back at the reading year and pick out my absolute top favorites, but I've done that and I can't wait to share them with you all. Unsurprisingly, all of them are either fantasy, sci-fi or magical realism, and I'm really excited to get into them because I absolutely loved all of these books. It's always really surprising to look back at my favorites as well because it's always a great mix of debut authors, of series favorites, of sequels and things like that as well. Some of my favorites I actually read back in January, and I'm so pleased that they made this list because it's been a fantastic reading year. So let's just get started. I'm going to go from number 10 down to number 1. The massive unveiling will be my absolute favorite book of the year. So number 10 is Thunderhead by Neal Shusterman. This is the sequel to Scythe and it's part of the Arc of a Scythe series. Now if you really like smart, technological, dystopian reads that are set in the far future where humans have evolved, and it goes into the philosophy of life and death and population control because humans have evolved so far that they just can't die anymore. So then you've got these scythes who actually control how they kill humans and how they select humans for population control. This series is for you. I absolutely love the first book because it was about the two apprentices, Rowan and Citra, and how they learn about the whole scythedom, and it was fantastic learning how these scythes have different philosophies, and it was really interesting. Instead of killing, it's called gleaning. They're also controlled by this omnipresent technological being called the Thunderhead. So the second book, Thunderhead, goes straight into how the Thunderhead makes its decisions, how it's monitoring everyone's thoughts, and how it basically decides whether it's fair and how its choices are just. This is a really complex series. It's just really interesting seeing and hearing how each and every character operates in such a highly technologically advanced world. Thunderhead has a huge twist in it as well, and I was absolutely compelled and I cannot wait for the next book. And I definitely recommend that you guys check the series out. Number 9 is Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Ngan, and oh my gosh guys, this book is definitely up my alley. It's a dark Asian inspired fantasy inspired by ancient China and basically the practice of concubines. Lee is a protagonist who gets selected to be a paper girl. As a paper girl, you are one of the 10 most powerful girls in the kingdom because you're one of the king's concubines. But it really delves into her defiance against this, and there's a lot of sexual assault, there's rape, there's the protection of female rights, and I loved how Lee never wavered in what she believed was right and what she believed was wrong. Even though other paper girls thought it was a massive privilege, you could see just how affected by this whole role they were. Now what I loved about Girls of Paper and Fire is how it delves into the deeper topics. It doesn't shy away from, you know, rape and sexual assault and how a female may feel when their body is not theirs, basically. And there's also some great magical elements in here. So there's a paper cast, a moon cast and a steel cast, some of which have animal-based features and abilities, and how it talked about the caste-based system. It's basically based on the author's own experience growing up in Malaysia. I love also the Chinese mythology in here. There's fantasy, there's magic. There's also a really great female-female romance. So Lee and Ren are a really great couple, but they don't take over the whole book. And yeah, I thought it was a really interesting play on the usual mysterious guy that everyone goes for in these types of YA romance books. In the end, I absolutely love Girls of Paper and Fire. It's such a fantastic book that you could see a lot of YA readers enjoying. The great thing about it is that it's Asian inspired fantasy and it goes into darker topics as well. Number 8 is The Astonishing Color of After, and this is by Emily XR Pan. This book was an unexpected favorite book which I talked about in my video, which I'll link up above and down below. Oh my gosh guys, this was a magical realism book that really swept me away. It's about grief and it's about a girl called Lee as well. Her mother dies by suicide, so she goes back to her roots in Taiwan where she stays with her grandparents, and she's also following a red bird who sweeps her into memories of her mother. So it's told in a interchanging timeline, one with her mother's memories and of Lee's childhood memories, and she also explores Taiwan and discovers her mother's favorite places and learns a bit more about her culture. Lee is actually biracial as well. She's half American and half Chinese, so it was interesting seeing how she discovered Taiwan and her culture and heritage, having lived in America for so long. A lot of second generation people like myself can really relate to this book, especially since you don't feel as close to your culture as you can be, especially going back and visiting your hometown and country. This was such a beautiful way to explore grief. It's kind of a slow moving book with just beautiful writing and glimpses of the past, and there was a lot of exploration into Chinese culture as well, and I really enjoyed it. Number 7 is Dracora by Lynette Noni, and this is the third book in the Midorian Chronicles series, which I picked up this year, and I've absolutely enjoyed every minute of it. I'm really glad that I listened to my friends raving about it, because it's one of the most popular YA fantasy series in Australia, and I wanted to see what the hype is about. Dracora contains like all of my favorite things. Basically there's time travel, there's dragons, there's the protagonist going back into the past and discovering what her enemy was really like back then, but then you kind of know how it's all going to play out in the future, which is also Alex's present. So it was really interesting discovering a bit more about the evil person in the series. And oh gosh, I just loved every minute of it, and I couldn't help overthinking as well while I was reading it about how her being in the past sort of plays out in the future, what the consequences were. Oh my gosh, it's so brilliant and magical and complex. And I love how this series actually gets deeper and darker and better with absolutely every book. The one following this one, Greyvale, I actually attended a vlog and interviewed the author Lynette Noni. I'll leave a link up above and down below as well to that video as well if you're interested. But I've already received the last book in the series, Vardacia, as a Christmas present from the publisher, so I can't wait to read it and delve more into this series. It starts off with Akane, which is the first book. It's a magical academy, and Alex goes to the Akane Academy where she learns special abilities, and oh my gosh, it evolves so much from there, and there's so much fantastic parts to this series. Number 6 is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. I feel like I've joined some sort of rite of passage after reading this book, because it is like the top selling fantasy of the year always. I actually read this when I was on holiday, so I got to absorb absolutely everywhere. There's over 600 pages. But oh my gosh, I really loved hearing about how Quoth, the protagonist, he's basically a boy, and learning about his tale as he becomes a legendary character in his current time. So he chronicles his life, you know, living on the streets, losing his parents, being in a circus, and also how he loves playing a musical instrument as well. But then he joins this academy and he gets bullied, and he's really poor and he's not as well off as everyone else. But you learn how he develops his talents, how he has steely resolve to get what he wants, and how he just tricks everyone. And I really love hearing about the magical system in here as well. We actually have a book club based off this book that is called The Name of the Book, and I got to see the significance of the name of the book club after reading this one as well. It has a really, basically a typical kind of fantasy world, but what makes this book really stand out is Quoth. Even though he's like kind of a meek protagonist, but then he just evolves so much throughout the series, and I just loved hearing everything that happened to him, the conversations that he had, and how he chooses to play out his decisions. This is a fantastic book, and I urge you, if you are a fantasy reader, to definitely pick up this one, because I can see why it is on a lot of people's favorites list, and I can't wait to read The Wise Man's Fear. Number 5 is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. Oh my gosh, guys, I actually read this book at the very start of the year. It was a 5-star read for me, and I can see why so many people love this book now, because it's based off Fey mythology, but it goes into really complex, morally grey characters. If anything, the main character, Jude, can probably be classified as an anti-hero, and you know how much I love anti-heroes. Basically, Jude is a human and she's abducted into the Fae world and she gets bullied. The bullying is actually really visceral and it's actually a trigger warning for some. But oh my gosh, I just love the Fae mythology in here and how it goes into lots of political intrigue, how Jude wants to overthrow the Fae kingdom and she wants to empower herself, but how does she do that as a human in the Fae world where she's basically used and regarded as a plaything? The way that it goes into her machinations and how she gains power and influence in this world, it was so fascinating. There is some romanticism of abuse though, especially when Cardan's involved, so there is also a trigger warning for that. But despite that, I love the complex Fae mythology in here. I love the morally grey characters and I just love Jude herself. Oh my gosh, she is so ambitious and she just does everything that it takes to break out of her circumstances and to gain a better position for herself, and that's what I loved about The Cruel Prince. Number 4 is Vengeful by V.E. Schwab. I've already talked about how much I love this on my channel, but oh my gosh, I think this was such a fantastic sequel, especially to Vicious. This is the second book in the Villains series, and it talks about two super geniuses who have a vendetta against each other. So Eli and Victor both have different methodologies when it comes to superpowers and getting rid of people who are called EOs. And this book delves straight into it from the first book. Not only that, but it also introduces new characters as well. There's Marcella, who I would pay to put a knife into me. And then there's also June, who has the power of changing her appearance and her body to suit. And oh my gosh, I love both of these female-led characters. They were really strong villains, and in fact, a lot of people can probably say that they love Marcella a lot more than Eli and Victor, as they take a backseat to her machinations in this book. So if you are sick of the typical happy superhero genre where they come in and save the world against evil or against monsters, pick this one up, especially if you like X-Men or people with superpowers, because it's all based on morally grey characters who are villains, and it's so fascinating. I just love this series because it's set in our modern times and people have powers based on near-death experiences, so the whole science of it really fascinated me. I also love each and every one of the side characters, and this one delves a lot deeper into each and every one of them. So definitely pick up Vicious and Vengeful if you love stories about villains or people with superpowers, or both. Number 3 is Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. Oh my gosh guys, the way this lady writes is so mystical, so magical. She sweeps you up into this poetic world that she's dreamed of. It just makes it so visceral as well. It's just really dreamlike. The way that she writes is so evocative and fascinating. Muse of Nightmares delves straight into what happened after Stranger Dreamer. I'm not going to go into spoilers, but you hear more about Laszlo's mysterious past, you hear a bit more about Minya and why she's like this evil child godspawn, and you see what happens with the godspawn in this book. There's also an inevitable confrontation which will result into war, and there's also 2 new characters that appear that were totally fascinating and a part of this world, and their fates all get intertwined. Muse of Nightmares did not do me wrong, guys. I was so excited picking this book up. I would even say it's even better than Stranger Dreamer, because Stranger Dreamer felt like a bit of an introduction to the world. Of course it would be, but this one just delves straight into what happens and the history of the godspawn, and oh, it's just so fantastical, and I absolutely loved it. I can see why people love this mythology, and if you haven't picked up Stranger Dreamer yet, what are you waiting for? Number 2 is Obsidio by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. Come on guys, you knew this was going to be on the list, right? I've read and reread Illuminae and Gemini multiple times, so of course Obsidio would be on this list. I don't know when I'll be rereading this book though, because it totally tore my heart apart. There are so many moments in this book that were sort of like quiet moments between the characters where they reflect on the journey that they've been on and what's ahead, and I cried so much during these quieter scenes. Like, I don't need to tell you guys how much I love Illuminae, right? Like, if you're into space operas, especially ones with evil, complex, AI characters. There's Aiden, and then you've got pilots and people living on ships trying to reunite with each other. Oh my gosh, it is such a fantastic series. Obsidio, I love seeing how each and every one of the characters that we've been introduced to in the past books all came together here. But it was still such a solid book because we learn what happens to them and whether they make it back to Earth and whether they convince that the Illuminate group is actually evil. And oh my gosh, I just adored the finale to the series. I was really happy about how it ended. So my name is also printed in here. I was one of the deaths based on the pre-order campaign, and when I saw what had actually happened to me as a character, it was just holy shit. I had to put the book down and walk away because it's just so intense. And look at the multi-format of this book. It's just so fascinating. And if you're into audiobooks, definitely pick the audiobook up because it is an experience of its own. There's sound effects, there's music, there's shooting and different narrators, and it is just a visceral experience. I love this series, guys, and it is one of my favorite series of all time. Now, my top favorite book of the year is The Puppy War by R.F. Kuang. Guys, if you haven't heard me rave about this on my channel yet, I don't know, I probably haven't been doing my job properly because it is one of the best books that I've ever read. And The Puppy War is basically a ancient Chinese military fantasy, and it's also a very grim and dark book that is filled with trigger warnings, but holy shit, it is so good. It's about a girl called Rin, and she's basically from a poor village in China, but she really wants to get into a military academy so that she can defend her country. And the way that she goes about this, it seems like her circumstances are absolutely impossible. Like, how does she get there? Oh my gosh, if you love those sort of like magic school books, you'll love the first half of this because she does get into this academy, and then, you know, she makes friends, she makes enemies, she learns new talents, and it was really interesting seeing her harness her ability as well. And then the second part is War. Oh my gosh, it's probably the most brutal and gruesome wartime book I've ever read. It is just like a wild ride. It is so brutal. There are so many trigger warnings here. I'll make sure to link you guys to them down below. I've never read anything quite like The Puppy War. I loved it so much because it goes into ancient wartime tactics, it goes into like magic and training and the religion and customs that Chinese people had back in the day, and it also features unforgettable characters. Rin is such an ambitious character, and she starts from basically nothing. She's really poor. She really struggles to reach her dreams, but her dreams are set up here. She wants to get into this rich military academy so that she can defend her country, and boy does she get there, but she does everything that she can to possibly rot the system. And she's just like a Slytherin queen, and you back her so much throughout the series. She's definitely flawed. Oh my gosh, it's actually based off a really dark time in Japanese and Chinese history, and I'm really glad that she didn't gloss over any of the facts, because when I looked at the rape of Nanjing, I looked it up and it was basically what was portrayed in here. So it's really brutal, but oh my gosh, the characters are fantastic. The journey that she takes there is so motivational, and I just loved every minute of it. And this is actually one of the most popular fantasy books of the year, because when I tried to order this book, because everyone was hyping it up and I wanted in, this was actually sold out. So it took me about 2 months to receive, but oh my gosh, it definitely deserves the top fantasy book of the year and my top 2018 book of the year. So those were my top favorites of the year. Let me know if you agree with me, if you've read any of the books, or any of the books I read were on your favorites list. Just leave me a comment down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.